The waitress was counting her final $17 for the third time, trying to make it cover rent and her brother's medication, when the homeless man collapsed against the diner counter and she realized she was 3 seconds away from choosing between her family's survival and a stranger's life. Nia's fingers trembled as she smoothed the crumpled bills on the break room table. 2 5s, 7 1s. The math remained brutal, no matter how many times she recalculated. Rent was $460 overdue. Leo's prescription refill would cost $83 at the pharmacy that wouldn't extend credit anymore. The $17 in her hands represented 6 hours of serving coffee and deflecting inappropriate comments from truckers who tipped in loose change. The evening shift at Riverside Diner on Chicago's South Side had been slow. Tuesday always was. She'd clocked in at 2, and by 6 the place held only regulars nursing bottomless coffee and making single plates of eggs last for hours. Her manager, Rick, sat in the back office, probably watching sports on his phone instead of checking inventory. Tasha wiped down already clean tables, complaining about her boyfriend loud enough for everyone to hear. Brad worked the grill, flipping burgers with one hand while scrolling through his phone with the other. The bell above the door chimed. Nia glanced up from her money, already reaching for her order pad. Then she stopped. The man who stumbled through the entrance looked like he'd been living rough for months. His clothes hung in layers, all of them filthy. A beard obscured most of his face. He moved like someone whose body was running on the last reserves of energy, each step requiring conscious effort. But it was his eyes that caught her attention, sunken, red-rimmed, desperate in a way that made her chest tighten with recognition. She knew that look. She'd seen it in the mirror 3 years ago, when Leo's leukemia diagnosis had arrived with a bill that might as well have been a death sentence. The man approached the counter slowly, pulled a handful of coins from his pocket, and spread them on the worn formica with shaking hands. He counted silently, lips moving. His shoulders hunched when he finished. "Coffee," he said, voice raw like he hadn't used it in days. "Just coffee, please." Rick appeared from the back office with the timing of someone who'd been watching the cameras. He took one look at the man and his expression hardened. "We don't serve vagrants," Rick said flatly. "Move along. I have money." The man gestured at the coins. "I can pay. That's barely $2. Coffee's $2.50, and you look like you haven't showered in a month." "Bad for business." Rick crossed his arms. "Out!" Tasha laughed from across the diner, the sound sharp and mean. "Oh, this is going to be good." Rick's about to go full bouncer. Brad leaned against the kitchen doorframe, watching with the entertained expression of someone watching a street fight they weren't part of. $20 says the guy tries to make a scene. The homeless man's hands curled into fists against the counter. Not aggressive, just trying to hold himself together. Nia recognized that too. The moment when you're about to break but you can't afford to because breaking takes energy you don't have. "Please," the man said quietly. "I just need something warm." Rick moved around the counter. I said out, "Don't make me call the cops." Nia's body moved before her brain caught up. She stepped between them, small but solid, and looked Rick in the eye. "I've got this," she said. Rick's eyebrows went up. "Excuse me?" "I'll handle it. Go back to your office." Her voice stayed steady even though her pulse hammered. "Nia, don't be stupid," Rick warned. She ignored him, turned to the homeless man and spoke gently. "Sir, when was the last time you ate?" The man's eyes met hers. Up close she could see past the grime and exhaustion to something else. Intelligence. Awareness. And an intensity that made her skin prickle with an instinct she couldn't name. 2 days, he admitted. Maybe 3. Behind her, Tasha's voice dripped with mockery. "Oh my God, little Miss Charity is going to save the day. This is precious." Nia pulled the order pad from her apron pocket. "Sit down," she told the man. "Counter's fine." He hesitated, then lowered himself onto a stool like someone whose joints hurt. She called back to Brad. "Cheeseburger, fries, and keep them hot. Coffee now, and whatever pie we have left. Full meal." Brad looked at Rick. Rick's face had gone red. "You paying for that?" Rick demanded. Nia reached into her apron, pulled out the $17 she'd been counting minutes ago, and set it on the counter. The bills looked even more pathetic under the fluorescent lights. Her hands wanted to shake, but she forced them still. "Yes," she said. "I'm paying for it." The room went quiet. Even the regulars stopped pretending not to watch. Rick's smile had teeth in it. "You're seriously going to spend your tips on this bum? You know I'm docking your pay for this, right?" Encouraging this type brings down the whole establishment. "Establishment," Tasha repeated with a snort. "Rick, it's a diner, not the Ritz." "Dock my pay if you want," Nia said. She didn't look at Rick. She looked at the homeless man, the way his hands trembled against the counter, at the hollowness in his face that she knew came from hunger that had gone past pain into numbness. Everyone deserves to eat. Tasha's laughter cut through the tension. Of course little Miss Charity thinks she's better than us. What, you think feeding one homeless guy makes you a saint? I think it makes her broke, Brad added, flipping the burger with theatrical flair. But hey, at least she'll feel good about herself when she can't make rent. The words hit harder than they should have because they were true. She was choosing this stranger over Leo's medication, over keeping the lights on, over everything rational and practical and smart. But she'd stood where this man stood. She'd felt hunger that made you dizzy. She'd known the shame of asking for help and watching people look through you like you were already a ghost. Someone had helped her once. A nurse at the hospital who'd slipped her a $50 bill and a grocery store gift card with instructions to eat something, to keep going, to survive. Nia had never learned the nurse's name. She'd tried to find her later to pay her back. The hospital said no one matching that description worked there. Maybe kindness worked like that sometimes. You couldn't pay back the person who saved you. You could only pass it forward and hope. Brad brought the food. Nia set it in front of the homeless man with care. The burger was hot, cheese melted perfectly. The fries were golden and salted just right. The coffee steamed in the heavy ceramic mug. A slice of apple pie sat on a separate plate. Ice cream melting down the sides. The man stared at the food like he didn't believe it was real. Take your time, Nia said softly. Nobody's rushing you. He picked up the burger. His hands shook so badly he almost dropped it. Then he bit down, and something in his expression cracked. He ate like someone who'd forgotten what food tasted like. No conversation, no manners, just desperate consumption driven by a body screaming for fuel. Nia turned away to give him privacy. Rick glared at her from the office doorway. Tasha shook her head with exaggerated disgust. Brad had already lost interest and gone back to his phone. 20 minutes passed. The man finished every bite, drank the coffee down to the last drop. When he finally stood, he looked at her with eyes that had changed somehow. Less desperate, more focused. He studied her face like he was memorizing it, his gaze lingering on her name tag. Thank you, he said. Just 2 words, but they carried weight that made them feel like more. He walked out without looking back. The bell chimed. Through the window, Nia watched him disappear into the Chicago evening. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the street, but there was still enough light to see him clearly until he turned the corner. She started clearing his dishes, the plates empty except for smears of ketchup and melted ice cream. That decision to feed him would save her life and destroy everyone who laughed. But in that moment, standing in the diner with her rent money gone and her co-workers' mockery ringing in her ears, she didn't know any of that yet. She just knew her hands had stopped shaking, that she'd made the only choice she could live with, that sometimes the right thing costs everything. Rick appeared beside her. You're done Thursday and Friday shifts. Maybe you'll learn some sense when your paycheck comes up short. Nia nodded, too tired to argue. Tasha's voice floated from across the room. Hey, at least when you're homeless yourself, you'll know which diner serves free meals. Brad laughed. Nia gathered the dishes and carried them to the back, her eyes burning but dry. Through the kitchen window, she caught one last glimpse of where the man had disappeared. Something about him nagged at her, the way he'd looked at her, the intensity beneath the exhaustion, and his hands. She'd noticed them when he counted the coins, again when he ate. Despite the layers of dirt, despite the torn clothes and the desperate hunger, his hands were wrong, too smooth, no calluses from rough work, no damage from living on the streets. The nails were dirty but intact, not broken or infected. The thought slipped away as quickly as it came. She had bigger problems, like how she was going to explain to Leo why his medication would be late again. If you've ever chosen compassion when you had nothing to spare, when every practical voice screamed at you to save yourself first, you know the weight of that moment. You know how it feels to bet everything on another person's humanity. Drop a like on this video and comment on the country you are watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Morning lights sliced through the gaps in the broken blinds, turning Nia's studio apartment into a grid of brightness and shadow. She woke to the sound of Leo moving around in the alcove that served as his bedroom, separated from hers by a curtain she'd hung 3 years ago. The fabric was faded now, printed with clouds that had gone grey from too many washes. Her phone screen showed 6:15. Her shift started at 7. Her body ached from yesterday in ways that had nothing to do with standing for 8 hours. Nia? Leo's voice came through the curtain. You awake? Yeah? She sat up, pushing hair out of her face. How are you feeling? Good, barely hurts anymore. The curtain pulled back and her brother appeared. tall and too thin, wearing the oversized shirt she'd bought him before his surgery when they'd both hoped he'd grow into it. His scar was healing well, a pink line across his abdomen where surgeons had removed the tumor that had almost killed him. "How was your shift?" The lie came easily, because she'd had practice. "Fine. Same as always." "Tip's good. Good enough." She smiled, hoping it looked real. "Go make yourself breakfast. There's cereal." He studied her face for a beat too long, and she saw their mother in his expression. That same ability to sense when something was wrong. But he was 16 and recovering, and he didn't need her burdens added to his own. "Okay," he said finally, and disappeared back through the curtain. Nia, dressed in her uniform, splashed water on her face and counted the money left in her wallet, $3.47. Her stomach was a knot of anxiety that made eating pointless anyway. The diner looked the same as always when she arrived. Same cracked parking lot, same flickering neon sign, same smell of old grease and burnt coffee. Rick was already there, waiting behind the counter with her schedule printed out. "You're on lunch rush all week," he said without preamble, "and I'm docking yesterday's pay. Consider it a lesson in fiscal responsibility." Nia took the schedule. Lunch rush meant 5 hours of chaos for minimum wage plus whatever tips came from people too rushed to be generous. She'd be lucky to clear $40. "Understood," she said quietly. Rick's smile was all edges. "Good. Maybe you'll think twice before playing hero again." Tasha arrived 10 minutes later, her makeup perfect and her expression eager in a way that meant gossip. She made a show of setting her purse down slowly, loud enough for the early morning regulars to hear. "So I told my boyfriend about yesterday," Tasha announced to no one and everyone. "About how Naya's so desperate for attention she's feeding homeless guys now. He said that's exactly the kind of thing lonely girls do when they want to feel important." Brad laughed from the kitchen. "Maybe she's hoping one will be rich in disguise, like a fairy tale. Prince Charming, but make it homeless. Right?" Tasha's voice carried. "Like that ever happens in real life. More likely he'll show up asking for more free food and she'll have enabled a whole problem." Nia tied her apron and said nothing. Words were ammunition here, and silence was the only defense she could afford. The morning crawled. A businessman left her $1 on a $15 check, making a point of counting out exact change. An older woman complained about everything, sent her coffee back twice, and left nothing but crumbs and criticism. A man in his 40s made a comment about her legs that made her skin crawl, but she smiled through it because that's what the job required. Her phone buzzed during her break. Northwestern Memorial Hospital. Her heart dropped before she even answered. "Miss Torres, this is billing. Your brother's follow-up appointment is scheduled for Friday, but we show a balance of $342 from the last visit. We'll need payment before we can confirm the appointment. Can I call you back?" Naya's voice came out steady even though her hand shook. "We need payment by end of business tomorrow. Otherwise, we'll have to reschedule." The line went dead. Nia sat in the break room, phone in her lap, doing math that refused to work no matter how she rearranged the numbers. Her next paycheck, minus what Rick was docking, would be around $200. She had $3.47 now. Even if she worked every available shift and every customer tipped generously, she'd still be short. Leo needed that appointment. The oncologist had been clear about follow-up care after surgery. Missing it could mean missing something critical. She pulled out the small notebook where she tracked every penny, writing numbers that felt like prison bars. Rent, utilities, food, medication, hospital bills. The columns never balanced. There was always more going out than coming in. Rick appeared in the doorway, coffee in hand, satisfaction in his expression. "Counting your regrets. Doing inventory," she said without looking up. "Right. Well, maybe think about your choices before playing Mother Teresa again. The world doesn't reward stupid generosity. It punishes it." He left. Nia closed the notebook, pressed her palms against her eyes, and tried to breathe through the pressure building in her chest. The afternoon shift started. She moved through it mechanically, refilling coffee, taking orders, clearing tables. Tasha's voice followed her like background noise, making sure everyone knew about yesterday's charity case. At 4:30, during the slowest hour, Nia was wiping down booth 3 when movement outside caught her attention. 3 black SUVs pulled into the parking lot. Not the beat-up sedans or work trucks that usually frequented Riverside Diner. These were expensive, gleaming tinted windows reflecting the afternoon sun. They parked in formation, taking up 6 spaces, engines rumbling in a way that made people on the street stop and stare. Her cloth stopped moving against the table. Behind the counter, Tasha had gone quiet. Brad stepped out from the kitchen, grease-stained towel in his hands. The SUV's engines cut off simultaneously. For a moment, nothing happened. Just 3 massive vehicles sitting in a diner parking lot like predators waiting. Then the doors opened, men in tailored suits emerged from the SUVs, 6 of them moving with the coordinated precision of people trained for violence. They weren't bodyguards trying to look intimidating, they were the real thing, and everyone watching knew it. The diner fell silent, conversations died mid-sentence, forks stopped halfway to mouths. Even the traffic outside seemed to quiet. Then the rear door of the center SUV opened, and he stepped out, the homeless man from yesterday, except he looked nothing like the person who'd collapsed against her counter begging for coffee. His face was the same, clean-shaven now, revealing sharp features and a jaw that could cut glass, but everything else had transformed. The filthy layers were gone, replaced by a suit that probably cost more than Naya made in 6 months. Charcoal grey, perfectly tailored, the kind of craftsmanship that whispered money without shouting it. His hair was styled back, still damp like he'd showered recently. His shoes caught the light, polished to a mirror shine, but it was the way he moved that sent ice down her spine. Confident, controlled, like he owned not just the parking lot but the entire block, the whole city, everything his eyes touched. Rick made a sound behind the counter, half gasp, half choke. Nia glanced back and saw her manager's face drain of colour until he looked grey. "Holy hell," Rick whispered. "That's Dante Carver." The name meant nothing to Naya, but the fear in Rick's voice meant everything. The man walked toward the diner entrance. His security fanned out, 2 taking positions by the door, 4 following him inside. The bell chimed, cheerful and absurd, as Dante Carver stepped into Riverside Diner like he was entering a cathedral. Every pair of eyes tracked him. The businessman who'd left Naya $1, the old woman who'd complained about everything, the regulars who'd occupied the same booth for a decade, all frozen, watching. His gaze swept the room methodically, taking in every detail, every face. When his eyes found Naya, they stopped, fixed on her with an intensity that made her forget how to breathe. She stood near booth 3, cleaning cloth still in one hand, completely unable to move. Her brain couldn't connect this man in the expensive suit with the desperate stranger she'd fed yesterday. They occupied the same face but lived in different universes. He walked straight toward her. His men flanked him, not close enough to crowd, but near enough to make their purpose clear. Protection. Enforcement. "Warning, you fed me last night," he said. His voice was different too, still rough around the edges but carrying authority that made it a statement rather than a question. Nia's mouth opened. Nothing came out. She managed to nod. He studied her for a long moment, something unreadable moving behind his eyes. Then he turned, his attention shifting to Rick behind the counter. "Is this your establishment?" Rick's hands fluttered uselessly. I'm the manager. Yes, sir, Mr. Carver. I didn't realize yesterday. If I had known, you threw me out." Dante's tone stayed level. Somehow that made it more dangerous than shouting would have been. "Threatened to call the police." "That was a misunderstanding, sir. A terrible mistake. What's your name?" Dante cut him off, but he was looking at Nia again. "Naya," she said quietly. Her voice sounded strange in her own ears. "Nia Torres. Nia Torres." He repeated it like he was filing it away permanently. "Your manager docked your pay for feeding me. Is that correct?" She hesitated. Every instinct screamed at her to minimize, to protect herself from whatever was happening here. Making Rick look bad to someone like this felt dangerous in ways she couldn't articulate. Tasha's voice broke the silence, pitched higher than normal, nervous energy spilling out. "It was just policy, sir. We didn't know who you were. Obviously, if we'd realized." Dante's head turned toward her. He didn't say a word, didn't move except for that slow rotation of his attention. Tasha's mouth snapped shut so fast Nia heard her teeth click. He looked back at Nia. "Answer me. Did he punish you for kindness?" The question carried weight that had nothing to do with volume. She could feel everyone watching, feel Rick's panic radiating from behind the counter, feel Tasha and Brad's sudden terror. She nodded. Dante raised one hand slightly. One of his men stepped forward, pulling an envelope from inside his jacket. He crossed to Rick and placed it on the counter with a sound like a judge's gavel. "Inside is the deed to this building," Dante said conversationally. "I just bought it. Transaction finalized 20 minutes ago." "You're fired." Rick's face went from grey to white. You can't." "I own it. I can do whatever I want." Dante's tone held the finality of stone. "You have 1 hour to collect your personal items and leave. If you're here after that, my people will remove you." Nia's heart hammered. Around the diner, customers sat paralyzed, watching a public execution that involved no weapons, no violence, nothing but words delivered like surgical cuts. Dante's attention shifted to Tasha, who'd pressed herself against the far wall like she could disappear into it. Then to Brad, visible through the kitchen window, his phone clutched forgotten in one hand. "You're also dumb here," Dante said to both of them. "I don't employ people who mock generosity, who laugh at someone trying to help a stranger. Collect your things. Leave." Tasha opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. "But I need this job. I have rent. I should have thought of that yesterday." No sympathy. No negotiation, just fact. Brad had enough sense to stay silent. He untied his apron with shaking hands. Dante turned back to Naya. The weight of his full attention felt like standing in front of a spotlight that showed every crack, every flaw, every secret fear she carried. "And you," he said, "come with me. We need to talk." It wasn't a request. The tone allowed no room for refusal. His men waited, patient and ready. The SUVs outside hummed with idling engines. Nia's hands tightened around the cleaning cloth. "I don't understand what's happening." "You will." He gestured toward the door. "But not here. Not with an audience." She looked at the exit, at the security waiting, at this man who'd been starving yesterday and now owned the building she worked in. Her legs didn't want to move, but her brain was screaming calculations. He'd just fired 3 people with the ease of someone swatting flies. He commanded men who looked like they broke bones professionally. He'd bought an entire property in less than 24 hours to make a point, and he wanted her to get in a car with him. "I have a shift," she said weakly, knowing how absurd it sounded. His expression didn't change. "You don't work here anymore either." The words hit like cold water. She stared at him, not comprehending. "You work for me now," Dante clarified. "Different job, better pay. But we discussed the details somewhere private." Behind her, Rick made a strangled sound. One of Dante's security moved toward him, a wordless warning that shut him down immediately. Dante extended his hand toward the door, not touching her, not forcing, but the expectation was absolute. Sometimes justice arrives in forms you don't recognize until it's already changing your life. Sometimes the tables turn so fast you get whiplash. If you've ever watched someone who hurt you face consequences they thought they'd escaped, you know that moment of shock when the world rebalances itself. Nia looked at his waiting hand, at the men flanking him, at the SUVs outside with their tinted windows. She thought of Leo at home, of hospital bills and rent she couldn't pay, of $17 she'd given away yesterday that had somehow bought her this moment. She dropped the cleaning cloth on the nearest table and walked toward the door. The SUV's interior smelled like leather and something expensive she couldn't name. Nia sat rigid against the seat, her body as far from Dante as the space allowed. One of his men occupied the driver's seat. Another sat in the passenger side. The partition between them stayed down, a subtle reminder that she wasn't alone with him, even though it felt that way. "I'm not going to hurt you," Dante said, reading her posture correctly. "But we need privacy for this conversation. Public places have too many ears." She nodded because words felt impossible. Through the tinted windows, Chicago passed in blurs of buildings and traffic. They were heading north, away from her neighborhood, toward the part of the city where restaurants had dress codes and valet parking. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, probably Leo, wondering why she wasn't answering his texts. Her fingers itched to check it, but pulling out her phone felt like admitting vulnerability she couldn't afford. The restaurant they pulled up to had a name she recognized from magazines. Celestine, the kind of place where entrees cost what she made in a week. The valet approached before the SUV fully stopped, opening Dante's door with practiced efficiency. "This way," Dante said, not quite touching her elbow but guiding her path nonetheless. Inside, the host took one look at Dante and abandoned the couple waiting at the podium. "Mr. Carver, your private room is ready." Private room. Of course. Because men like Dante Carver didn't eat where people could watch. They moved through the main dining area, past tables with crystal glasses and plates that held food arranged like art. Every server they passed nodded deferentially. Every guest who noticed looked away quickly. The private room was small but elegant. 1 table, 4 chairs, walls covered in fabric that probably cost more than her security deposit. A window overlooked the city, but the glass was tinted dark enough to hide them from outside eyes. Dante held out a chair. Nia sat because standing felt more dangerous than sitting. He took the seat across from her, close enough to see every reaction on her face, far enough that she couldn't call it crowding. A server appeared instantly with menus and water. "Bring the tasting menu," Dante said without opening his, "and tell Marcus we're not to be disturbed." The server vanished. Nia's hands twisted together in her lap. "You should eat," Dante said. "You look like you skipped lunch." "I'm not hungry." Her voice came out steadier than she expected. "You're terrified." He leaned back, the movement casual, but his eyes stayed sharp. I understand, but I meant what I said. You're not in danger from me. Then what am I? In debt to me, or rather, I'm in debt to you. Depends on how you look at it. She forced herself to meet his gaze. I don't understand any of this. Yesterday you were homeless, starving. Today you're buying buildings and firing people. Who are you? You already know my name, Dante Carver. Does it mean anything to you?
No.
Something flickered in his expression. Surprise, maybe, or relief. Good. That's refreshing. Should it mean something? In most parts of Chicago, yes. I control territories on the south and west sides. Distribution networks, protection services, various business interests that operate in grey areas the law prefers not to examine too closely. He said it like he was describing a completely legitimate career. I'm what polite people call a crime boss, what less polite people call other things. The words hung between them. Nia's throat went dry. She'd fed a Mafia boss, given her rent money to someone who probably had more cash in his pocket right now than she'd see in 5 years. Yesterday, she managed. That was real. You were actually starving. Yes and no. I was testing the neighborhood, seeing who still had humanity when they thought nobody important was watching. But the hunger was real. I hadn't eaten in almost 3 days by the time I walked into your diner. Why would you do that to yourself? Because I need to know who can be trusted, who has character when they think nobody's watching. Most people reveal their true nature when they believe there are no consequences. He picked up his water glass, watching her over the rim. You gave away money you desperately needed. Why? The question felt like a test. She answered with truth. Because lying to someone like him seems suicidal. Because I know what starving feels like. My brother had cancer. We couldn't afford treatment and food. I learned what real hunger is. The kind that makes you shake, that makes everything hurt. And I learned what it feels like when people look through you like you're not even human. She met his eyes. Nobody should have to beg for food. Nobody. Dante set his glass down carefully. Your brother. The hospital bills I heard mentioned yesterday. He survived? He's in remission. For now. But the debt from treatment will follow us forever. Not anymore. Before she could ask what that meant, he reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. Not the deed he'd given Rick. This one was thicker, heavier. He slid it across the table. Open it. Her hands shook as she lifted the flap. Inside was cash. Stacks of hundreds bound with paper bands. More money than she'd ever seen outside of movies. Your brother's medical bills, Dante said calmly. Paid in full as of 2 hours ago. Your rent covered for the next year. And a signing bonus for your new position. Nia couldn't breathe. I don't understand. I pay my debts. You fed me. Now I'm taking care of your needs. I don't want anything from you. The words came out automatically, defensive. His smile was sharp and humorless. That's not how this works. You helped me. I help you. That's the rule. That's how debts are settled. I'm not in your world. I can't be part of whatever this is. You are now, he said simply, like he was stating the weather. The moment you chose to feed me instead of saving yourself, you stepped into my world. The question is whether you walk through it with my protection or without it. The food arrived. Perfect plates of things she couldn't identify, arranged with precision. The server set them down and disappeared like smoke. Nia stared at the envelope, at the money that could save her and Leo, at the man across from her who transformed from beggar to king in 24 hours. What do you want from me? She whispered. Your eyes, your instincts. The same quality that made you see me when everyone else saw trash. He cut into something on his plate with surgical precision. You work for me now. The details we'll discuss. But understand, Nia Torres, I don't make offers twice. Her phone buzzed again. Leo, hospital bills. Rent she couldn't pay. A future that would look like drowning. And this man offering her a lifeline that came with chains she couldn't see yet but knew existed. What kind of job? She asked. His smile turned genuine for the first time, and it transformed his face into something almost beautiful. For your new job. You work for me now. Dante cut another precise piece from his plate and continued like they were discussing office work instead of something that sounded increasingly like espionage. The job is simple on paper. You'll work at Vella, one of my legitimate restaurants. High-end Italian place downtown. Hostess position. Better pay than the diner. Better hours. Better tips. Everything completely legal and above board. But, Nia said, because there was always a but. But the real job is reporting to me. Weekly meetings more often if needed. You tell me what you observe.
About what?
About people. He set down his fork, giving her his full attention. You saw me when others didn't. You looked past the surface to the human underneath. You'll do the same with my clientele, my business associates, the people who move through my world thinking they're invisible or invincible. The pieces clicked together in her mind with sickening clarity. You want me to spy? I want you to do what you already do naturally. See people clearly. Read them. Tell me who's trustworthy and who's performing, who's loyal and who's waiting for the right moment to betray. He leaned forward slightly. In my world, knowing who to trust is the difference between staying alive and ending up in the river. You have an instinct for that. I'm asking you to use it. For you.
Yes.
Her hands curled into fists beneath the table. That's dangerous. People find out I'm watching them, reporting back. They won't find out unless you tell them. And I protect what's mine. You work for me, you have my protection. Anyone who touches you answers to me. The casual way he said it made the threat more real, not less. This was his world. Violence as currency, fear as leverage, power as the only shield that mattered. I need time to think, she said. Dante studied her for a long moment. She expected argument, pressure, the kind of manipulation that came with offers this large. Instead, he nodded. You have until tomorrow, noon. My driver will take you home now if you want. Keep the envelope regardless of your decision. Your brother's bills are paid either way. Consider it payment for yesterday's kindness. She started to stand, desperate for space to breathe, to think, then stopped, the question burning too hot to hold back. Why me specifically? You have money, power, connections. You could hire anyone, professionals who know how to do this. Why a waitress from a dying diner? Dante rose from his seat, moving around the table until he stood close enough that she had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something dark and expensive, close enough that her body registered his presence as both threat and something else entirely. Because most people who have nothing left become cruel, he said quietly. They hoard what little they have. They look out only for themselves because that's the only way they've learned to survive. But you stayed kind. You gave away money you desperately needed to feed a stranger who looked like nothing. That's rare. That's valuable in ways you don't understand yet. Her pulse hammered in her throat. Fear, yes, but also something electric that made her skin feel too tight. And because, he added, his voice dropping lower, I don't forget the people who saved me, even from something as simple as hunger. You saw me as human when everyone else saw trash. That matters to me. You matter to me. The words hung in the small space between them. His eyes held hers with an intensity that made it impossible to look away, and she realized with sudden clarity that the way he looked at her had nothing to do with gratitude. This was something else, something more complicated and infinitely more dangerous. He stepped back, breaking the moment. Tomorrow, noon. The numbers on the card in the envelope. Call either way. The ride home passed in silence. Mia clutched the envelope in her lap, feeling its weight, like evidence of a crime she hadn't committed yet. The driver pulled up to her building, the SUV looking absurd against the backdrop of cracked pavement and faded paint. Leo was on the couch when she entered, laptop open, doing homework. He looked up, started to smile, then saw her face. What happened? Rick fire you? Something like that. She set the envelope on the small kitchen counter, trying to look casual, failing. Leo crossed to her, saw the cash visible through the open flap. His eyes went wide. Naya, what is that? A tip. A really good tip. From who? A millionaire? Close enough. Something like that. It covers your appointment. And rent. We're okay for a while. He wanted to ask more questions. She could see them forming, but he also knew when to leave things alone, when to trust that she'd tell him what he needed to know when he needed to know it. That night she lay in bed, staring at the ceiling while Leo slept beyond the curtain. Her mind kept replaying the day in fragments that didn't fit together. The homeless man collapsing at her counter. Dante Carver walking into the diner like he owned it because he did. His voice saying, "You matter to me," with an intensity that felt like a brand. She kept seeing his eyes. First desperate and hollow, then sharp and commanding. The transformation was complete, but somehow both versions felt equally true. Like he contained multitudes she was only beginning to understand. The way he'd stood close to her in that private room. The way her body had responded despite every rational thought screaming danger. Fear and attraction were supposed to be opposites, but in that moment they'd felt identical. Dawn arrived without sleep. Nia made coffee, checked Leo's medication schedule, and stared at the business card Dante had slipped into the envelope. Simple black card, white text. A name. A number. Nothing else. She picked up her phone. Her hands were steady. The call connected on the second ring. "I'll do it," she said. "But I have conditions." Vela occupied the ground floor of a building that gleamed with new money. Glass front, exposed brick inside, lighting that cast everything in warm gold. Nia arrived at 2 in the afternoon, the time Dante had specified. A hostess station stood near the entrance, currently unmanned. The lunch service was ending, a few lingering tables finishing wine and dessert. Dante emerged from a door marked private, dressed in black slacks and a charcoal shirt with the sleeves rolled to his forearms. Less formal than yesterday, but no less commanding. "Your conditions?" he asked without preamble, something like amusement playing at the corners of his mouth. She'd practiced this, written it down, memorized it so fear wouldn't steal her words when it mattered. "I won't hurt anyone, I won't lie to innocent people. And my brother never knows what you really do. He thinks you're a restaurant owner. That stays true." Dante considered her, arms crossed, weighing her demands against whatever calculus ran through his mind. "Agreed. Anything else? If I'm working for you, I'm not your property. I'm an employee, not an asset. I can quit if this becomes something I can't live with." His expression shifted. Something that looked like respect crossed his features, genuine and unguarded. "You have more spine than most of my men. They take orders. You're negotiating terms. Do we have a deal?" she asked, keeping her voice level. He extended his hand across the space between them. "We have a deal." Their hands met. His palm was warm, calloused in places that surprised her. The contact sent electricity up her arm, a current that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with the way his thumb pressed against her pulse point, feeling it race. The handshake lasted 2 seconds too long to be professional. When he released her, the absence felt like cold water. "Come on," he said. "I'll show you your new workplace." The restaurant was beautiful in ways Riverside Diner never could be. Real art on the walls. Tables with actual tablecloths, a kitchen visible through glass where chefs worked with the precision of surgeons. He introduced her to the staff one by one. The manager, Marcus, who treated her with careful respect. The servers, who smiled with varying degrees of warmth. The kitchen crew, who nodded acknowledgement. They all treated her well, but she noticed how they looked at Dante. Respect, yes, but underneath, fear. The kind that came from knowing exactly what he was capable of. Her first shift started that evening. A Friday, which meant reservations packed tight, wealthy clientele expecting perfection. Nia stood at the hostess station in clothes Dante had provided. Black dress, simple but expensive, shoes that actually fit. She greeted guests, managed the seating chart and watched. That was the real job, watching. Reading the micro-expressions, the body language, the way people treated staff when they thought nobody important was looking. A businessman who snapped his fingers at servers. A couple who spoke in tones too quiet for comfort. A group of men whose suits couldn't quite hide the violence in their shoulders. She took mental notes like Dante had asked. Filed away observations for the weekly meeting he'd scheduled. 2 hours into the shift, a customer became loud. Expensive suit, entitled voice, face red from wine. He'd been rude to a server all evening, but when a young busboy accidentally brushed his elbow while clearing the adjacent table, the man erupted. "Watch where you're going, you idiot!" The busboy stammered an apology, eyes down, body language screaming submission. The customer wasn't satisfied. "Get me your manager, now." Nia saw Marcus start forward, saw the busboy's face go pale. She moved before thinking, crossing the floor with purpose. "Is there a problem, sir?" The man turned his anger on her. "Your staff is incompetent. That boy nearly ruined my suit. I want him fired." She kept her voice calm. He apologized. "Nothing was damaged. Perhaps we could offer you a complimentary dessert and—" "I don't want dessert. I want him gone." "Who do you think you are?" "The hostess. And I'm telling you that's not going to happen." The man's face went darker. "Get me your manager or I'll make sure you're both unemployed by morning." Marcus appeared at her elbow, terrified. Before he could speak, a presence filled the space behind her. She felt Dante before she saw him, the way the air changed when he entered a room. "She works for me," Dante said quietly. His voice carried across the suddenly silent restaurant. "Are we going to have a problem?" The customer's face drained of colour. Recognition hit him like a physical blow. "Carver." "I didn't realize." "I apologize. There's no problem." "Why?" "Good. Enjoy the rest of your evening." Dante's tone made it clear the conversation was over. The man grabbed his coat and left, abandoning his half-finished meal. Money still on the table, but dignity abandoned in his wake. Dante turned to Naya. "You did that on purpose, testing your protection." She met his eyes, refusing to look away. "I needed to know if your word was good." He laughed, genuine, surprised, the sound transforming his face into something almost boyish. "Most people are too afraid to test me. I'm terrified, she admitted, but I'm also tired of being powerless. His expression softened, something warm moving behind the constant calculation. You were never powerless. You just didn't have resources. Now you do. The week that followed was an education in duality. She worked her shifts, learned the rhythm of the restaurant, memorized faces and names and the subtle tells that revealed character. She met with Dante 3 times, reporting what she'd observed, getting better at articulating the intuition that had always lived in her gut. But the meetings became more than business. He asked about Leo, about her dreams before cancer had made survival the only goal. She asked about his world, the empire he'd built from nothing. Why do it, she asked during their 3rd meeting, sitting in his office while rain drummed against the windows. You could go legitimate. You have the money. Control, he said simply. When you grow up with nothing, you either stay nothing or you take everything. I chose everything. I grew up with nothing, she countered. I didn't become you. He was quiet for a long moment, his dark eyes holding hers with an intensity that made breathing difficult. No, he agreed finally. You became better. The words settled between them like a confession. Something shifted in the air, in the space they occupied. She saw him differently in that moment, not as the dangerous man who owned restaurants and territories, as someone who recognized the paths not taken, the person he might have been if different hands had fed him when he was starving. Seeing someone's humanity doesn't erase their danger, but it complicates everything. It makes them real in ways that can't be undone. If you've ever looked past someone's power to the person underneath, you know how that changes things. 2 weeks in, she was closing the restaurant alone. Marcus had left early, trusting her with the final walkthrough. She was checking table settings when the front door opened. 3 men entered. Wrong suits, wrong energy, wrong everything. She knew immediately they didn't belong. And when their eyes found her, when the leader smiled in a way that promised violence, she knew exactly why they'd come. They were here because of her. The leader was tall, expensive suit, doing nothing to hide the violence in his build. His 2 companions flanked him, hands inside their jackets where weapons lived. They moved with the casual confidence of men who knew fear worked better than guns. You're the waitress he's protecting, the leader said, stopping a few feet from the hostess station. The one from the diner. Nia's hand moved slowly toward the phone on the desk, trying not to make it obvious. The restaurant is closed. You need to leave. Smart girl. Polite. I can see why he likes you. The man smiled without warmth. We're not here for dinner. We're here because Dante Carver killed our associate over a territorial dispute. We can't touch him directly. Too much heat, too many connections. But you... So you came for me? Nia finished, her fingers finding the phone's edge. See? Smart. You're going to call him. Tell him to meet us at the address we give you. Alone, unarmed. Or we take you with us and send him pieces until he shows up. She lifted the phone. Not to make the call they wanted, to press the panic button Dante had shown her on day 1. Silent alarm that went straight to his security. The leader saw the movement, understood it half a second too late. Grab her. The nearest man lunged forward, his hand closing around her arm with bruising force. Nia's free hand grabbed for anything, found a wine bottle from the service station, swung it toward his head. She never connected. A gun barrel pressed against the man's temple with a soft click that sounded deafening in the sudden silence. The grip on her arm released instantly. Dante stood behind the rival soldier, weapon steady, eyes colder than Nia had ever seen them. His men materialized from shadows she hadn't known existed. 4 of them armed, positioned with tactical precision that said they'd done this before. Touch her again, Dante said quietly, and I'll paint these walls with you. The rival soldier raised his hands slowly, backing away from Nia. The leader's jaw tightened, but he didn't reach for his weapon. The math was clear. They were outgunned, outmaneuvered, and standing in enemy territory. This is neutral ground, Carver, the leader tried. Restaurants are business, not a battlefield. Nothing is neutral when it comes to her. Dante's voice could have frozen blood. You walked into my place, threatened my employee. Put your hands on her. There's no neutral ground left. Guns drew on both sides. The tension turned physical, heavy enough to choke on. Nia found herself looking at 9 men with weapons, at furniture that would provide no cover, at walls that had seemed beautiful minutes ago and now looked like a tomb. Her voice cut through before anyone could pull a trigger. Please. She stepped forward, ignoring Dante's sharp look. Not here. Not in this place. People work here. They have families. This place doesn't deserve blood. Dante's jaw was tight enough to crack teeth, but he didn't take his eyes off the rival leader. You have 10 seconds to leave, he said. If I see you near her again, if I hear you've been asking about her, if your shadow falls across her path, there won't be a warning. There won't be a conversation. There will just be a funeral. The rival leader hesitated. Pride versus survival. Then he gestured to his men. We're leaving, but this doesn't end here, Carver. You know that. Yeah, it does. Because the next move is mine, and you won't see it coming. They backed toward the door, weapons still drawn until they hit the street. The moment they disappeared, Dante's men moved, securing the perimeter, checking sightlines, transforming the elegant restaurant into a tactical position. Dante crossed to Naya in 2 strides. Are you hurt? I'm fine. Her voice shook despite her best efforts. The adrenaline was fading, leaving her hands trembling and her knees uncertain. He holstered his weapon and pulled her close. Just for a moment, just long enough for her to feel his heart hammering as hard as hers, to realize he wasn't as controlled as he appeared. His arms were solid around her, protective and possessive in equal measure. You're not fine, he said against her hair. The embrace broke almost as soon as it began, but the warmth of it stayed. She looked up at him, saw something raw in his expression before he locked it down. This is my fault, he said. I brought you into this. Made you a target. I chose this, Nia reminded him, her voice steadier now. I knew the risks. Not well enough. I'm moving you. You and Leo. Somewhere safe. Somewhere they can't find you. No. The word came out sharp, final. I'm not hiding. That's not the deal. The deal doesn't matter if you're dead. Then teach me how to protect myself. She met his eyes with all the determination she'd used to feed him when she had nothing. You said I have your protection. Fine. Protect me by making me less of an easy target. He stared at her like she'd grown a second head. You're serious? Completely. I won't live in fear. I won't run and hide and wait for danger to find me anyway. Teach me what I need to know. Something shifted in his expression, surprise giving way to something darker, more intense. He studied her face like he was seeing her for the first time, really seeing her, and what he found there changed a calculation she couldn't follow. Fine, he said finally. Training starts tomorrow, but tonight, you're staying where I can see you. Pack a bag for you and Leo. You're coming to my penthouse until I know it's safe. The penthouse occupied the top 3 floors of a building that looked over Chicago like a throne surveying its kingdom. Floor-to-ceiling windows showed the city in every direction, lights spreading to the horizon. The furniture was elegant without being cold, the kind of wealth that whispered instead of shouted. Leo had been delivered safely an hour ago by one of Dante's men, installed in a bedroom bigger than their entire apartment, and was currently sleeping despite his protests that he wasn't tired. Nia stood in the main living area feeling dizzy from the height, the luxury, the sheer impossibility of her life in the past 3 weeks. Dante moved to the bar, poured whiskey into 2 crystal glasses. He brought one to her, the amber liquid catching the light. I need a clear head, she said without taking it. Around me? Something dangerous moved through his voice, a challenge wrapped in curiosity, especially around you. His smile was sharp. He set both glasses down on the table between them, then settled onto the sofa, not close enough to crowd her, but near enough that the space between them felt deliberate. Tell me about your brother, he said. The real story, not the version you give strangers. She sat across from him, city lights painting shadows across both their faces. The truth came easier than it should have, maybe because danger had stripped away the point of pretending. Our parents died when I was 19. Car accident, drunk driver, gone in seconds. Leo was 11. I became his guardian because there was nobody else. Worked 3 jobs to keep us fed and housed. When he got sick, when the diagnosis came, I learned what real fear feels like. Not afraid of dying, afraid of watching him die and being powerless to stop it. That's why you worked the diner, why you couldn't quit despite Rick. That's why I understood hunger, she said quietly. Real hunger. The kind that makes you desperate enough to do things you never thought you would. The kind that teaches you what matters when everything else burns away. Dante was silent for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he spoke, and his voice carried weight she hadn't heard before. My father starved me as punishment, starting when I was 6. He'd lock the pantry, the refrigerator, tell me discipline required suffering. That weakness came from comfort. He stared at the whiskey he hadn't drunk. He said it would make me strong, teach me that the world owed me nothing. Nia saw him differently in that moment, past the power and the control to the boy who'd learned hunger as a lesson instead of circumstance. The child who'd been taught that cruelty was love. That's why you tested the neighborhood, she realized. You were testing yourself too, seeing if you'd become him. Maybe, she moved before thinking, crossing the space between them to sit beside him on the sofa, close enough to feel his warmth, to see the shadows the city lights carved into his face. You're not him, your father. How do you know? Because you noticed when someone was kind. because that mattered to you. He wouldn't have seen it, wouldn't have cared. She reached up, touched his face with fingertips that trembled slightly. You could have ignored me, could have let me give you food and walked away, but you came back. You protected me. You're trying to be better. His hand came up to cover hers, holding it against his cheek. The touch was electric, grounding, real in ways that made everything else fade. You make me want to be better than what I am, he said, his voice rough. You already are, she whispered. The distance between them disappeared. She wasn't sure who moved first, if it was her, or him, or both simultaneously. His mouth found hers with a hunger that had nothing to do with food and everything to do with the recognition that passed between them. Two people who understood loss, who'd survived when survival seemed impossible, who'd found each other in the margins where kindness still existed. The kiss was inevitable, desperate, honest in ways words couldn't be. Her hands tangled in his hair, his arm wrapped around her waist, pulling her closer. The city lights blurred through the windows, time losing meaning as everything narrowed to this moment, this connection, this acknowledgement of what had been building since he'd walked into her diner wearing hunger-like armor. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, the air between them had changed fundamentally. This complicates things, Dante said, his forehead resting against hers. Everything about us is complicated, Nia countered. Has been from the start. He laughed quietly, the sound breaking tension she hadn't realized she'd been holding. True. Morning arrived with sunlight streaming through windows she'd forgotten to close. Nia woke in the guest room, sheets softer than anything she'd ever felt, her body still humming with the memory of his kiss. They hadn't gone further than that. He'd walked her to the door, said goodnight like a gentleman, and left her with the taste of him on her lips and questions burning in her chest. The smell of coffee drew her out. Dante stood in the kitchen wearing jeans and a t-shirt, looking domestic in ways that shouldn't fit someone who commanded an empire through fear. He poured her a cup without asking, added cream the way she liked it. Your brother called, he said. I told him you were safe. Didn't give details. Thank you for not lying to him. Training began that afternoon. His men took her to a private gym, taught her how to throw a punch that connected, how to break a hold, how to read a room for exits and threats. Dante supervised, correcting her stance, pushing her harder than felt comfortable but never past what she could handle. She was fierce, learned fast, turned fear into fuel and fuel into capability. Weeks passed. She worked at Vela, reported her observations, trained until her muscles ached. She became part of his world but kept her soul intact. And slowly she began to change him too, suggesting negotiation before violence, questioning whether every slight required blood, reminding him that power without mercy was just tyranny wearing expensive suits. Their relationship deepened. Stolen moments in his office, conversations that lasted until dawn, kisses that promised things neither of them dared speak aloud. They kept it hidden from his organization, from her brother, from everyone who might use it as weakness. His enforcer found them in Dante's office late one evening, urgency written across his face. We have a problem, the man said. The rival family knows about you two. They're planning something big. The plan was simple, in the way that all terrible ideas sound reasonable until you're standing in the middle of them. The rival family wanted leverage. They'd go after Leo, the only person who could make Dante surrender territory without a fight. They'll grab him on his way to physical therapy, Dante's enforcer explained. Blueprints spread across the conference table. Tuesday afternoon, same route he takes every week. They've been watching for patterns. Nia's blood went cold. How long have they been watching my brother? At least 2 weeks. We caught their surveillance yesterday. Dante's jaw was tight enough to shatter. Double security on the kid. Move him somewhere safe until we neutralize the threat. No, Nia said. Both men looked at her. We use him as bait. Absolutely not. Dante's voice could have cut steel. He's my brother. I won't hide while he's in danger. We set a trap. Let them think they can take him. Then you end this. Not you. I won't risk you. She stood, planting her hands on the table. We do this together or not at all. You taught me to fight, to protect myself. Now let me protect him. His need to shield her from violence against her refusal to be powerless. Finally, she said the words that broke his resistance. If something happens to Leo because I hid, I'll never forgive myself. Or you, together. But you follow my lead. No improvising. No heroics. The trap came together with precision. Leo would go to his physical therapy appointment as scheduled. Nia would accompany him, protected but visible. Dante's men would position themselves throughout the building, waiting. When the rivals made their move, the walls would close in. Leo was terrified when they explained it. Not of the danger, but of understanding what his sister had become involved in. These people want to hurt me to hurt him? Leo asked, gesturing at Dante. Yes, Nia said, no more lying. And you're okay with this? With him? She took her brother's hand. He makes me feel safe, protected. He gave us a life we couldn't have had otherwise. And yes, his world is dangerous. But our world was killing us slowly. I'd rather die fighting than starve quietly. Leo looked at Dante, studying him with the intensity of someone much older. You love her? Yes, Dante said without hesitation. Then don't let them take me, because if they do, it'll destroy her. And I can't watch that happen. Tuesday afternoon arrived with autumn sunlight that felt cruel in its normalcy. The physical therapy clinic occupied the second floor of a medical building downtown. Windows overlooked a busy street. Multiple exits. Dante's men positioned on every floor, in every stairwell, blending with medical staff and visitors. Naya sat in the waiting room with Leo, her phone in her pocket, Dante's voice in her ear through a discreet earpiece. East stairwell, his voice came through. 3 men. Moving your direction. Her pulse hammered, but her hand stayed steady. Leo sensed the shift in her energy, his own fear manifesting in rapid breathing. Stay close to me, she whispered. The rivals burst through the therapy room door with guns drawn. Patients screamed. Staff dove for cover. The leader's eyes found Leo immediately. Move and the kid dies, he shouted. Then Dante's men appeared. From behind reception. From therapy rooms. From hallways and closets and positions that turned the clinic into a kill box. 10 armed men with weapons trained on 3. The rival leader's face went white. We've been set up. Dante walked through the main entrance, flanked by his enforcer, looking like death in an expensive suit. You threatened what's mine. There are consequences. The rival leader made a desperate choice. He grabbed for Leo, using him as a shield. Nia moved faster. Her training kicked in, muscle memory overriding fear. She threw herself between them, her body shielding her brother as gunfire erupted. The fight lasted 30 seconds. Dante moved like controlled fury, his men executing with precision that spoke to years of practice. When the smoke cleared, 2 rivals were dead, one wounded and disarmed. The leader was on his knees, Dante's gun pressed to his skull. Police sirens wailed outside. Dante made a call. When uniformed officers arrived, they moved through the scene with the efficiency of people who already knew what report they'd file. Leo had seen everything. The violence, the bodies, the way police deferred to Dante like he owned them. Because he did. Later, in the safety of Dante's penthouse, Leo asked the question Naya had been dreading. Who is he really? She told him the truth. All of it. Someone dangerous. Someone I love. Someone who will always protect us. He makes you happy? Yes. Leo was quiet for a long time. Then I trust him. Because you've kept me alive this long, I trust your judgment. After Leo went to bed, Nia found Dante on the balcony staring at the city he controlled. This is my life now, she said. Your world. I accept it. All of it. He turned, searched her face. Are you sure? There's no going back once you're this deep. I've never been more sure of anything. He pulled something from his pocket, a small box that made her heart stop. Then there's something I need to ask you. Something I've never asked anyone. 6 months later, Nia woke to sunlight streaming through windows that overlooked a city she'd once only served. The penthouse had become home in ways she hadn't expected. Her clothes in the closet beside his, her books on the shelves, evidence of her life woven through his until the seams became invisible. Dante was already in the kitchen making coffee with the focus he applied to everything. She managed 3 of his legitimate restaurants now, sat in strategy meetings as his equal, made decisions that affected territories and money and power. His organization had learned to respect her not because she shared his bed, but because she'd earned it by being right more often than they were. Leo appeared from his room, taller somehow, healthier, wearing the uniform of the private school that had accepted him on full scholarship. A scholarship Dante had arranged but pretended he hadn't. You two are disgustingly domestic, Leo announced, grubbing cereal. It's like watching a rom-com but with more guns. Naya threw a dish towel at him. He dodged, laughing, and she realized with startling clarity that this was family. Not the one she'd been born into, but the one they'd built from necessity and choice and the kind of love that grew in unlikely soil. The doorbell rang. Dante answered it, returned with a package wrapped in plain brown paper. He set it on the counter in front of her. What is it? She asked. Open it. Inside was a folder containing legal documents. She read the first page twice, not believing the words. The deed to Riverside Diner, transferred to her name. Paid in full. I thought you might want it, Dante said, watching her face. Turn it into something good. She stared at him, speechless. What would I do with a diner? Whatever you want, feed people who are hungry. Train people who need skills. Make it what you wish it had been for you. He moved closer, his hand finding hers. Build something that matters. She kissed him hard and grateful and overwhelmed. You really have changed. You changed me, he corrected. The memory surfaced unbidden. Him collapsing against her counter, desperate and hollow. Her $17 spread on Formica, making an impossible choice. Neither of them had imagined this future. Neither could have predicted that one meal would rewrite both their lives completely. That evening they stood inside the empty diner. Dante had bought out the lease, cleared the space, left it for her to reimagine. The booths were gone, the counter remained, scarred and familiar. Through the windows, Chicago moved past in its endless rhythm. I was testing humanity that night, Dante said quietly. You restored mine, I just fed you. You saw me. He turned to face her. When I was nothing, when I looked like trash everyone else wanted removed, you saw a human being worth feeding, worth saving. You were never nothing. Neither were you, he said. But the world treated you like you were, made you invisible unless you were serving someone. I know what that feels like. They stood in the place where everything had started, where kindness had cost her everything and given her more than she'd known existed. What do we do now? She asked. He smiled, the expression transforming his face into something soft and genuine. We feed people, we protect what's ours, we build something better than what we came from. Together, she said. Always together. The renovation took 3 months. She oversaw every detail, turning Riverside Diner into something new while keeping its bones intact. The sign above the door read second chances in letters that caught the afternoon light. Inside, people who needed meals got them. No questions asked, no judgment passed. She trained servers who needed work experience, fed families who were one paycheck from disaster, created the space she'd wished existed when she was drowning. Dante sat in the corner booth most afternoons, laptop open, conducting business that was equal parts legitimate and grey area. But his eyes tracked her movement through the diner, protective and proud in ways that made her heart steady. Leo bussed tables on weekends, saving money for college, teasing customers in ways that made them tip better. He was safe, healthy, thriving in the life they'd built from desperation and choice. The impossible family nobody had planned. The kingdom built from $17 and hunger and one moment of kindness, when kindness seemed like the most expensive thing in the world. She'd fed a starving man with money she couldn't spare, and he'd given her a kingdom. But the real gift was never the money or the protection or the power. It was being seen completely, her kindness, her strength, her worth, by someone who knew exactly what it meant to be invisible, to be dismissed, to be treated like nothing. Sometimes you save someone with a simple meal. Sometimes they save you right back. And sometimes the person you feed when you have nothing becomes the person who gives you everything. If this story moved you, I'd be grateful to hear your thoughts. And I would really appreciate it if you could share your thoughts about my videos in the comments. Your feedback helps me improve and create even better content for you. Thank you for being here.